and I'm happy to have a chance to tell you about OregonFlora, our program, and what sort of information it can give to you about botanical life as we know it in Oregon. So let me. Okay, are you still seeing just the title slide? Jack, is it looking just the title slide?
Title slides up
Okay,
and ready for you to advance
okay,
again.
great. Okay, I'm first going to start by thanking all the people that make our program possible. OregonFlora has been in existence. This is our 30th year. So we've been working at this for 30 years, and it has always been a small, self-funded program that's based in the Botany and Plant Pathology Department at Oregon State. We've had a small staff, and we have worked in all of these years to gather all the information about the vascular plants of Oregon. So reminder, vascular plants are those that have vascular tissues. That's everything from ferns to grasses, lilies, trees, herbs, shrubs, basically all that stuff except mosses, liverworts, lichens, and fungi. So all the other stuff. And there are over 4,700 unique vascular plants that we have cataloged in the state of Oregon that grow in the wild, that is without cultivation. And so we have been working to get information about these, including identification tools, descriptions to make a comprehensive reference and resource about this plant diversity in our state. Currently, you see listed here our staff. And we also, by being at OSU, have an opportunity to work and mentor with students. We also have a whole lot of volunteers and associates, people who have helped us out in professional capacity as an extension of their professional skills, as well as people who are plant lovers at heart, but maybe an accountant or who knows what in their professional training lives. And lots of folks find ways to be a part of the OregonFlora team. Again, we're self-funded and we've received a lot of support, and we partner with the Native Plant Society of Oregon and have gotten grant funding from the different organizations listed, as well as a lot of donations, which really make up the majority of our operating budget. Again, we're based in the botany department at OSU, and we work very closely with Oregon State University Herbarium, because a herbarium is a repository of all of those plants as actual dried pressed specimens, and the information about each of those plant specimens that is integral and essential for making a flora. So, if you were to turn around, so let's take a little mind game and a little fantasy travel here. So say you look up from your computer screen away from this webinar, and you look out the window, a beautiful plate glass window, and you see this sort of scene. So what would tell you, by just looking out the window, not knowing where you are, what would tell you where you are on the planet? If I said that you're someplace in Oregon. So look at the photo, and because I can't interact directly with you, I'll give you some prompts about things that people might recognize as items that give you information about where you are. I see a lot of dry grasses, some bunch grasses. I see what looks like juniper trees in the background, rocky, dry looking area. Looks like there's plenty of sunshine. It's pretty bright and open. I don't see any signs of a lot of moisture or any springs or seepy grounds or anything. So those are all pieces that might help you figure it out. And now look again up from your computer screen, and instead this time, this is what you see when you look out your window. So again, what sort of characteristics, just looking at this vegetation, might tell you something about where you are? So in this image, I see a lot of spike rushes, looks like ash trees in the background. I bet if I look down, my feet are wet from where I'm standing. So it's very green and lush. And so if you use these pieces of information, just looking at the types of plants, the general environment in which they're in, you might have guessed that in that first image that you were somewhere in eastern or central Oregon, and that is indeed true. And in this image right here, you'd probably guess you're somewhere in the Willamette Valley, and that's exactly where this is, in Lane County. When you think back to what some of those characteristics are that helped you figure out where in the state of Oregon you were, just looking at the vegetation, you're actually demonstrating that you have this inner knowledge, this gestalt about what makes up an ecosystem or an ecoregion. And that is sort of a frame of reference that OregonFlora uses to think about and organize our information about the plants of the state. So an ecoregion is an area that, when you consider all of the biologic and the abiotic features of that area, such as the plant types, the variety and the diversity of species that exist in the place, also then those physical parameters, like what are the soils like, how much water is present on the landscape, what sort of light regime is present in there, all of those features put together will give you a good sense of what kind of plant communities and other organisms you might expect to find. There are always going to be different habitats within every ecoregion, and many habitats, such as like a riparian, streamside area or a meadow, might be found in multiple ecoregions. But in general, these are really helpful to get a sense of what sort of plant diversity we can expect to find in a certain area of Oregon or anywhere in the world. So let's just take a real whirlwind tour through some of the ecoregions. We'll sort of start in the upper right corner. And I just want to share some really beautiful photographs that demonstrate the diversity of both the landscapes and the plant diversity that exists in these areas. So up in that northeast corner of the state, we have the Blue and Wallowa Mountains. And this is an area that also includes the Strawberry Mountains, where this picture is taken, the Wallowas, Hell's Canyon over along the Idaho border. And so the geology is really different because it's sedimentary and sort of granitic kinds of rocks. And that's really different from what we see in the Cascades, which are volcanic. So you do have really different plant communities that aren't going to be completely similar to what you find in the Cascades over here in this northeastern corner. So then a little farther south of that is the Owyhee uplands. And these are a little bit different from the basin and range. Still, you have this really dry landscape because it has playas and a lot of arid sagebrush kind of steppe habitats. And also some really interesting plants. These two examples that I have here on the top, it's a Mentzelia packardii, and Phacelia. These are endemic plants, that is, they only are found in Oregon, that have been kind of recent discoveries as well. And so we continue sort of going clockwise around the state into the basin and range region. And the basin and range, it does not drain to the ocean. And so that makes these really shallow playas that can get kind of saline. And they often are seasonally wet. And so you have a really interesting flora that has these short, brief periods of bloom when the rains first come. And then again in the fall when you get another flush of moisture and precipitation on the landscape. So moving more towards the west, we have the eastern Cascades slopes and foothills. And a lot of this is in the rain shadow of the Cascades. And you're probably familiar, if you've traveled any, heading east, to the ponderosa pines and how distinctly how distinct it is once you cross over the Cascade Crest and drop into those ponderosa pine and the lodgepoles and sagebrush juniper kind of territory. There's lots of volcanic activity. You can see that fresh, relatively new basalt flows, and so it makes really thin soils, lots of pumice, and it's kind of fast draining, and it's a fire-dependent ecosystem. And also sort of plunked in the middle that looks like a big spider is the ecoregion we call the lava plains. And that's where you really have this emphasis on the basalt soils and some really striking landscapes and landmarks like the fossil beds and this image here of Clarno Butte. So moving northward up to the Columbia Basin, that is a really fertile area where the soils have been made as a result of having survived several different being reamed out by the Missoula floods. And so these soils are wind-blown silt that have accumulated on top of these lava flows and made this very fertile landscape that's just in this, in the Columbia Gorge. So it's just a couple miles wide. And this is obviously a place where a lot of agriculture is established, as dryland agriculture, because of those rich soils. In the Cascades, an area that perhaps many of us are familiar with because we're fortunate enough to be so close to them, you have really a lot of diversity and a typical Douglas fir or coniferous forest with Doug firs and hemlocks sort of dominating the overstory, as well as beautiful alpine meadows and a lot of diversity. Lane County, think about that county, which spans from the crest of the Cascades all the way to the ocean. So this is really a diverse area because it captures 4 different ecoregions, and a large portion of that is the Cascades. What it runs into, of course, is the Willamette Valley. And that's where the bulk of the population of Oregon exists. And this is, again, a river-driven system, a valley of the Willamette River, and has experienced floods, and you have a lot of alluvial soils that make for wet prairies and a lot of oak savannas, oak woodlands and savannas that were dominant on this landscape in the Willamette Valley prior to the settlement. Also, it's a good place to note where I currently live south of Corvallis on Kalapuya land, and the indigenous people in the area where I'm from, the Kalapuya, managed this landscape for millennia. And we can see some of that in the remnants of the open prairies and the oak savannas that still exist. Continuing westward towards the ocean, we encounter the Coast Range, a really lush, very moist woodland forest that also contains a lot of alders and big leaf maples, a lot of heavy moss cover, and a deep understory that merges into the estuarine coast. Again, that's also a kind of harsh environment with a lot of influence by winds and the salt contents and even some challenges with water because of being on these exposed places where the wind's coming off of the coast. And then finally, down in the southwest corner, we've gone to the diagonal opposite on the state, is the Siskiyou ecoregion. And this is a really biodiversity hotspot, globally recognized as such. And in Oregon, it's the ecoregion that has the greatest number of unique plant species, or taxa, has over 175 different unique plants. And this too is largely a fire-driven environment that has seeps. It has a lot of oak and oak family forest, open forest, and dry forest, along with conifers. And pictured here are some of the unique plants, including on the right-hand side, that Calmeopsis leachiana, which is found only in the Siskiyous, and a lot of pitcher plants up in the top corner, and then a Navarretia at the bottom. So all of this information, if I were to ask, where do you find out about things like what I've just shown you? You know, what makes up the plant communities in an ecoregion? Where do we find all these plants? How do we know what plants occur in any given ecoregion? When asked, well, what's the key source for that kind of information? You know, don't say Google, but instead think about a flora. And that is a primary source of information about the plants of any given area. And it's comprehensive in the sense that a flora tries to capture all of the known plants that occur in a region. And for us, OregonFlora, we're talking about the geopolitical area of defined as Oregon. And to give tools that help you understand those plants, their what diversity exists there, what kind of information could be used that's core information but might be relevant to some different field. I think one of the most critical areas that is informed, or studies that is informed by a flora, is that of land management. And that ranges from the vast land managers, such as the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. Remember, federal agencies own over half of the acreage of our state, to people who have a little garden. You know, as a gardener or a landscaper, you are a land manager also, and you're choosing what plants can exist there and how they can be maintained and promoted. So having information about what naturally occurs in an area without cultivation, what grows in the wild, how to identify them, and to understand them and gain a sense of where they fit on the landscape, are all things that a flora helps us achieve. So just some nice numbers here. Oregon's in our state, we have quite a bit of diversity. As I mentioned, we have over 4,700 different species, subspecies, or varieties. I'll refer to those as taxa. And so we keep track of these, but we also have a lot of names. So if you have had a chance to visit our website, we have a lot more names than just 4,700 in our database. And we have almost 12,000 different scientific names. Well, why do we need to keep track of so many different names? Well, it's because one of the characteristics of taxonomy and people trying to understand their world and put a name on things so we can better understand it, that's what we humans do, that creates a lot of sort of duplicates or synonyms. Just like in English grammar or in grammar, a synonym is an alternate name for something. And so some studies may have called a plant, based on their knowledge, a certain name, such as Mahonia for Oregon grape. But as information comes in and scientists and taxonomists have a chance to gather new information and consider new data, they might change the name to better reflect its evolutionary origins. And so, as in OregonFlora, we refer to that plant as berberis. So these are the way that we can accumulate a lot of scientific names. And while we like to use the nomenclature that we've developed for Oregon so that everybody who's dealing with Oregon plants can be on the same page and refer to a plant with the same name, we always provide, through our database and through our tools, a cross-reference in a way to look up information under whatever name you know it as, whether you use Mahonia or berberis, and still have the same information about that plant, that taxonomic unit that we're referring to. And so we also accumulate new names and new plants when new discoveries are made. And some of that is impacted by new plants appearing in our state or disappearing from our state because of climate change, because of new plant discoveries, because of invasive species that have come in and established themselves in the landscape. So OregonFlora is working in all of this. We have not only a website, but we're putting this information into a paper version, which is a very traditional format for this kind of knowledge. And it's taking the form of 3 volumes of the books, or the Flora of Oregon. We've published volumes 1 and 2 and are working very hard to complete volume 3. We anticipate that'll be done early next year. And for these volumes, of those 4,700 plants, we are providing detailed descriptions and distribution maps and identification keys for all of the plants that are naturalized in Oregon. So that means they're either native, and about 74% of all the things that we are aware of growing in the state are considered native plants, indigenous to this area prior to Western European settlement there, and things that have naturalized. So that is plants that didn't really belong here, but because they have persisted over multiple years, have been observed typically in more than one population, they can reproduce and maintain their own populations and spread without human help. Those are what we call naturalized plants. So all of those are what get treated in the Flora of Oregon books. But again, our website covers all the plants that we are aware of, whether it is native, naturalized, or non-naturalized. That is something that is, an escaped ornamental, something that, sort of kept growing out of somebody's compost bin that isn't a part of our flora. We keep track of those. So if you were to open the books, what would you see? Here's a page spread that demonstrates or that shows this kind of information, what the format of a flora is. And again, this is a type of text that people have used for centuries to communicate about plants. You'll see that it's based in groups, just like the way we think about plants, which is hierarchical. You start at the top in the most encompassing level of taxonomy, which would be a group. In this case, you can see the picture of gymnosperms, and then you go to plant families. And within a plant family are multiple genera, or genus. You can have a lot of different genera or genuses in. And then within each genus, you have species. And so to help you understand and identify these, you have dichotomous keys. That's the indented areas where you can choose between a suite of characters. You have 2 choices, hence the name dichotomous key, and you choose for your unknown plant the suite of characters that best represents your unknown specimen, and then follow that lead to the next one, and you'll be given another set of options until you come finally to the identification. For each taxon, we have a detailed description that gives information about everything about the physical nature of the plant, all sorts of measurements of leaves, the number of parts in a flower, as well as its plant habit. Is it a shrub? Is it, a creeping stolon? Its habitats, where it can be found, specific information about its location in the state of Oregon, such as counties and the elevation in which it occurs and bloom time. We also have little thumbnail maps that show with dots on it where that plant has been documented. In the case of our maps in the flora, those dots are based on Oregon State University herbarium specimens. So you can actually go and touch and look through a microscope and examine a plant that has been given this name. And that's a good way to have that. That's some of our most high quality, verifiable information to document the occurrence of a plant that we give as proof that this plant does occur there. So other things that you'll find in the books include some context for all of this information. So a lot of that stuff I described can be like too geeky for a lot of people. And so we really strive in our program to help people understand the relevance of plants in their lives, because plants obviously touch every human being's life, every organism's life and existence depends on plants. You know, it's the very basis of our pyramid of life and the web of life. And so we have chapters in the front of each of these volumes that sort of expand and expound upon how plants are relevant. In the examples here, there's a chapter on what's basically the 50 best hikes. It's your bucket list for botany in Oregon, places that you can go to see examples of the flora of these different ecoregions that I shared with you. And then the lower right is a chapter about ecology that sort of goes into some of the depth of the ecoregions that we were discussing. And then we also have things in volume 2 about landscaping and gardening with native species and plant-insect interactions, focusing on pollinators and moths. So this is an example of how plant information is really relevant to a broad group of people in different sectors of interest. And we can provide this foundational knowledge about plants that feeds this information and this interest that relates to a whole bunch of people, and hopefully gives those people some insights into some of the details of botany and plant diversity. In volume 3, we're going to be presenting chapters on ethnobotany and how indigenous people have helped to shape the plant life that we see in Oregon now, and a chapter on climate change and its impacts on the plants that we find in our state. So this is the 21st century, and books are beloved by many, but they're also very heavy, and we would be remiss to not take advantage of all of the tools that technology give us, such as websites and ways to interact with information. You can interact certainly by turning the pages of a book, and I will never ever give up my hard copy floras, but there's so much more that we can do, and that is exactly what OregonFlora has really embraced, is the ability to use a website to share even more information in interactive ways that people of all different backgrounds and skill levels can tap into. And so we make this, our website is really a digital flora. And hopefully we've worked really hard to make it engaging and pretty and useful to different interests. But it's also really important to realize that it's also based on hard scientific facts and scholarly research. So we want you to think it's beautiful and marvel at the great photos and look at the ways you can, some of the tools that I'm about to share with you, but know that this is not just, gathered from the ether by who knows what. We diligently curate this information and make sure that it is scientifically accurate and up to date. And then we put that into these tools that we are making and designing so that everybody can enjoy it and not be overwhelmed by all those big Latin words or those complex vocabulary terms. And they can enjoy and learn how to apply this information in ways that fit their life. So again, this is, interactive information that we're providing that's all based on this knowledge that we store in a database that makes both the books and the website. We have a database that manages all of this and connects all of these pieces so that you can see the relationships, and we've carefully broken down information about each photograph or each herbarium specimen or each unvouchered observation that exists, and capture that information in fields that then let you have really powerful tools to slice and dice it and pull things out according to your interests or your study of or your topic of research. So again, I'm going to share some more pictures that just sort of give you a sense of some of the diversity as we're talking about botany, botanical life in our state. These are some of the plant groups that you'll find in the different volumes of the flora. And this again covers all of the plant families, the vascular plant families that you'll find. So in volume 1, we cover the ferns, conifers, and the monocots. So you have ferns, but also some of the monocots include lilies and grasses and sedges. So we have a lot of beautiful things in those groups. So in volume 2, there are, we have about 1,400, I think, or 1,500 different taxa that are presented in there. And some of the big families that are found are the Apiaceae or the carrot family, and that includes things like lomatiums and Queen Anne's lace and hemlocks. There's also the aster family or the sunflower family, and that is the largest plant family in Oregon. And it was actually the first plant group that the founder of OregonFlora started on to create a checklist as the beginnings of the flora. And in this picture, you can see from our insects chapter, here's a longhorned bee on a plant, and asters are common in a lot of different habitats. So another family that's a big family in volume 2 are the Brassicaceae. Those are often food plants and horticultural. So we have a lot of those that are that were naturalized that didn't weren't indigenous to the area. And a lot of these plants are sort of weedy things that can occupy disturbed sites. So in volume 3, the book that's coming up, we organize it in a way that everyone can understand, which is alphabetically by plant families. So we're looking at the last half of the dicots. And some of the big hitters in that volume include families that include the saxifrages. And this is a plant family that has a lot of its origins of divergence. So, you know, it's thought that the plant group of the saxifrages started and diversified from the Pacific Northwest. And so you see a lot of different types of genera from the saxifrages occurring in Oregon. And these are great plants, often found in moister areas. Also, we have what used to be the figworts or the snapdragon family. And here's a case where we got really lucky because as an example of how taxonomists work and some of the consequences of gathering new information and finding new data, often genetic information, what used to be called the Scrophulariaceae, or the plant family that held this, that you knew that you were looking at a penstemon or you were looking at a snapdragon, or you were looking at a paintbrush. Well, that got blown to pieces and turned into 6 different plant families. And I say that we're lucky about that because all of those families are at the end of the alphabet. So we're really glad that what we think of as old people who've been in botany for a while and still have it in their head, oh, that's a scroff. They all are, we can find out all the details in volume 3. So that includes things in the Plantaginaceae, like penstemons, this rare penstemon that I've got a picture of, Orobanches, paintbrushes, and Scrophularia even is still there. So another big family in our final volume is the Rosaceae, and you probably all can think of many different examples of plants in that family from from strawberries to spirea to amelanchiers and little flowers like this cinquefoil. So these are a lovely group that we have that will be featured in this final volume. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time showing you, giving you a demo of some of the features on our website. And I was telling Jack and Cynthia earlier that we have been having, I'm going to give a caveat here because yesterday we discovered a glitch in our in one of our Grow Native tools that causes things to freeze up. So I'm crossing my fingers here that I can get through this demo and show you all of the features of the plants, or all the features of our website without it freezing up. And I urge you to be patient with us. And if you happen to go look at the website after this webinar and hit some glitches, just be patient and remember to come back in a few days because we're working on it. We are aware of it. So anyway, let me try and change and take us to the live website. Okay. Do you see the homepage now of the website?
You're good, Linda. It looks good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go quickly through this, but one of the first features to recognize is that you can search for any plant. So in the search bar, if you can see my cursor, either right there in the center of the home page, which says type a plant name here, or always in the top bar in the green toolbar, navigation bar at the top of every page, you have a search box. And in this, you can type anything. You can type common names that should appear. And it's not doing this drop down, but anyway, you can see, okay, it should be showing some drop downs, but you can type in common names or scientific names. And again, remember, you can type in names that are synonyms or accepted names. Let's see if we can get anything that comes up here. And so I started typing balsam ariza, and then you can see the variety of things that show up here. So when you type in a plant name, what it does is it brings up a profile page. We have profile pages for all of the plant names that are in our database. And what you'll find on any profile page of any name, whether you search for it under a synonym, under its common name, I could type in arrowleaf balsam root or arrowleaf and then find it. You'll see a major sort of glamour shot, a picture that gives you a sense of what the plant is. And over on the right-hand side, you get some of the details about the name, whether it's a native or an introduced or an exotic. You also have an interactive map. Clicking on this would then open up a map where you could then click on any dot and get all of the information behind that plant occurrence. Each dot represents a plant occurrence, whether it's from a vouchered photograph, a herbarium specimen, both at OSU and at other institutions, or an unvouchered observation. We are also going to be integrating in the near future iNaturalist records. So those are going to be yet another source of information. Once vetted, we're not just going to take everything, but we're going to curate that information from iNaturalist and put the best observations that we can confirm as part of our resources that you'll be able to find through our website. We also have descriptions. And so these are descriptions from the flora of Oregon when they exist, or another flora. And if we have other pages that emphasize a different aspects, such as the grow natives that I'll show you in a little bit. You'll also notice, if you look closely, that some of these words have little stippled underlines associated with them. And those are in our glossaries. So you can click on those words that have the underline and get a definition. So again, that's a way that we're trying to make this information accessible to more people. So not only do you have that glamour shot, but you have a whole slideshow of all of the field photos that we have for each image. Each one has a page that describes all of the information, such as when it was taken, where, who did it, and sometimes other information, such as other plants seen or other notes taken, as well as herbarium specimens. So again, for each piece of information, whether it's a location on the map, whether it's a photograph or a herbarium specimen, behind that we have in our database, and we share with the public all the information about that particular plant occurrence. We have well over 1 million such records of information about plants. Let's look now at some of the tools that we have. Under this tab selection of Explore, we have a mapping tool, and this is a slightly more advanced tool that lets people find information about Oregon's plant life in 2 ways. You can find the diversity of an area by defining an area and then getting all the resources about that. So if I draw a shape around someplace, I can get all of the records, the plants that have been documented that we have in our database that occur there. And you can see from these tabs that we have 1,168 different plant occurrences in that little shape that I drew. And of those, we have 525 unique taxa. Clicking on any dot will put it in like a shopping cart section, and you can then get all of the details about each record. And here's an example of the kind of information that we parse out for every single record, just as I was describing, whether it's a photograph or a specimen. In this case, it's from a different university in Central Oregon. So that's the mapping tool that gives you a sense of the diversity of an area. Another way you can use the mapping tool is to see the distribution of a plant. So if you want to know where any particular taxon occurs, you can enter a name with any other criteria and select it. Maybe you want it only in a certain county or from a certain collector, and then see where all that plant occurs. So this gives you a sense of the range of that plant species. You can also look at multiple species. You'll notice that we have records that are beyond the state of Oregon. So this again is a way that we're leveraging this software that we use to get information from other institutions and share that in the context of the Oregon plant life. Another tool we have is the Identify Plants. So it's hard to use a dictionary. You know, people always say, well, go look up how you spell a word. Well, how do you look it up to know how to spell it if you don't know how to spell it? You know, sort of this circular argument. So we give you a better way. Instead of just throwing you at a book with lots of terms and dichotomous keys, we just say, where are you on the planet? You generally have a basic idea of that. And you can just drop a pin on the interactive map. And then what our website does is it pulls records from that area of all the known occurrences that we have for a plant. In this case, our database has 1,054 unique plant species that occur within an area from that place where I put the pin in. From that place, so you've now created this little species list. It's like this mini flora around the place that you are. So if you can pick up your unknown plant, you've eliminated a whole bunch of other stuff that's not relevant because it has never been documented in that area. You can then select from any of the characters that exist to narrow down your list. So you might want to choose, you know, that you're looking at an herb. And so that's going to narrow the list down from over 1,000 to 712. Every time you select a character, it changes based on what remains what sort of other features might be helpful for you to identify this plant. You can choose any one of them that you recognize. If you see that it has orange flowers, you can click on that, and your list is going to get smaller and smaller until you can finally just look at the choices that you have, and then based on the information on the profile page, the pictures, the distribution map, the descriptions, determine if that is your unknown plant. So that's one way that we help a lot of different people identify and learn more about botany. So another tool that we have is the inventories, and for the sake of time, I won't talk about that, but that is a collection of lists that that are everything we know about a particular area. So this is a great tool to use if you are going to, say, go on a hike. You can look at either the maps that are available. We have over 5,000 different or 4,000 different over 5,000 different lists that people have already collected for an area, and that can be a starting place for a checklist as you go on a hike, and you can tick off the things you see or add names of things that haven't been included in those lists. And that best hikes place that I was telling you about that is in volume 1, we also have that expanded digitally here. So we also, as are the face to the OSU herbarium. So we're how OSU herbarium shares its information with the world, and you can get details about all of the plants of OSU as well as other herbaria through these tools. And then a feature that is new that we're working to launch is a new rare plant guide. And this is going to have information that's really valuable to the federal and state agencies, as well as organizations that help us monitor and protect these very special plants. And that's going to be coming in the near future, this spring, and it'll be a lot like the Grow Natives tool, which I am about to show you. So the Grow Natives tool I'm going to put here is a tool that is based on native plant species that are used in gardens and landscaping. And similar to that Identify Plants tool, we have different characteristics that will help you decide how you might want to use a native plant in your planted environment. So say you're looking for something that will deal with shade. So you can select shade, and again, every time your list is going to winnow, and we feature right now 300 different plant species, native plants, taxa from around the state that are commercially available. And so then you can choose other characters. Maybe you're looking for something that will be a good ground cover. And every time, you get different winnowing down of that list, and you can choose things according to the environment you're trying to create in a garden or in a restoration project. And then the feature that we've just launched, and what's currently causing the glitches in our system, is some of the commercial availability of these species. So we are reaching out to different nurseries and growers to see if they want to have their native plant species included in this tool. And this is a way that people can then look for a plant, because everybody gets so excited about gardening with natives, but then it's like, well, where do I find the plants? So this is one way that we can help and get people information about where is this plant going to thrive, what does it look like, how can I expect it to act in my garden, what might be a good kind of garden combination to put it in, and also where can I find a place to buy it. And so we're hoping to expand this and get the glitches out as soon as possible, and let people connect with places based on their geographic region as to where they can find this material. So just to wrap up, again, our website is a digital version of the flora, and what drives it all is our work that we've been working on for 30 years to keep track of things. And we started with a checklist, and this is something that we're constantly working on. You know, taxonomy is a dynamic field. It's always changing because we're always discovering something as humans and thinking about things differently and trying to find the relationships and how things evolved to better let us know how something can exist in relationship to other plants and to its environment. And so this is something that's always, you know, changing, and our website lets us keep track of this stuff and share this in a way that a hardbound or a paper-bound book cannot do in a timely fashion. And so we keep this information. We just published version 2.2 of the checklist a few weeks ago and pushed that through all of the tools on the website. And so here's a place where you can see the latest names, see what changes happened, and keep track of all the newest stuff and how that here aligns with our books. We also just do want to emphasize the importance of having these books and how we can accommodate the changes that occur in between the publications of volume 1 or volume 2 or volume 3 through these tables and PDFs that keep you up to date. That is sort of, in a nutshell, what OregonFlora does. And if you are excited about this or interested in this, we hope that you find this a really valuable tool and something that you might be interested in engaging in. And also, if it's something that's of use to you, we welcome your support. And so with that, I think I'll just stop and take any questions.
Thank you, Linda. Very interesting presentation, your books and the website. What's the history of the website? How long has this been live?
We have had this version of the website, which is based on a Symbiota software, a software designed to share natural history collections information, since 2020. So the pandemic hit, everybody sort of went into hibernation, and we did 2 of the biggest milestones in OregonFlora program in quite a while. We launched this website in the fall of 2020, and we also published volume 2 in 2020. So we had lots of good stuff happening in a pretty bleak time.
Are there sister websites for other states that you're aware of?
There are some that do things similarly to what we do. CalFlora is a site that does some of this stuff, that presents information that they've gathered from multiple sources to show photographs and share species descriptions taken from the Jepson Manual, which is California's regional flora. Washington State does not have such a website, because again, this is not only a tool for looking at herbarium specimens. Washington State and largely the University of Washington manages a consortium website that aggregates a lot of herbarium information, but they don't quite have the flora information for their state or for the flora of the Pacific Northwest as we do. And the Northeast has Northeastern US has a great website that want to say it's called Go Botany or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember. That does have a sort of concept similar to what we do. So there are some websites, comparable websites out there.
Well, there's a few questions that Larry asks, where exactly on the website can he find information on the plants you might encounter on a hike?
That would be a good place to start is in the inventories. So I'm going to share.
Explore, then inventories. Okay.
Are you seeing my screen? Does it say inventories now?
Yes, yes, you're doing well.
Yes. Okay. So in our species list collection, again, that's a list of lists that it's a group of species lists that individuals at the Native Plant Society and agencies have submitted. And here you can either select it geographically, you can go on the map and zoom to an area and look for that, or you could type in something like, say you're going to Muddy Creek, and you can then open up a list and see the list as either a list of names or with the identification tools that I demonstrated earlier.
Very good, very good. Some other questions. Claudia asks, some invasives have been here for quite a while and are pretty well established. She's thinking of Arum metallicum and lesser celandine, for example. What would you say is the difference between a naturalized and an invasive plant?
And invasive is a sort of it's a personality trait. And something is weedy, that's also sort of a personality trait because invasives that have established in the landscape, which we ascribe that to being a naturalized plant, has characteristics such as having been present in the landscape without human cultivation for about 5 years. There are multiple populations of it. It's able to reproduce either vegetatively or through seeds and maintain and expand its populations. So those invasive species like bull thistle, lesser celandine, blackberries, those all are meeting those criteria and have been on the landscape, and they are naturalized plants and they can also behave as invasives.
Understood. Thank you. A question from Lorna. She compliments you on your amazing tool and curious where you get your mapping information because she's looked up where she lives and the road she lives on is mislabeled and shows a road that doesn't exist in her area. I think she's up in Clatsop County, if I recall.
Our base maps are a Google Maps feature, and so we tie into Google Maps to use their features, and then the information as to where the dots are comes from OregonFlora's database. So that's the start for the maps that are on our profile pages that you can click and link to. So it's basing those roads and stuff on Google knowledge.
So if you're proofreading or looking for errors, she clarifies that she's in Coos County on Henry George Road.
Okay.
Okay. Debbie says, I think you've divided vascular category into 3, native, naturalized, and another you briefly mentioned. What was that last category?
It's non-naturalized or not naturalized. So if you choose, if you look through profile pages of things that have not naturalized, it simply states not naturalized.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's in central Portland and totally confused about how to select plants that will thrive in both our extreme dry heat and our icy wet winters. How could this tool be used in that to find plants that might go in her landscape?
I would look in the Grow Natives tool for things that could be drought tolerant. And then in those, you'll probably see some that can then you could also try, I haven't tried this lately, also checking for those cultivation preferences, things that tolerate wet periods, I think is the character, and see if there's any overlap there. But some of it could be, what's the more limiting feature? Is it, having completely saturated soils in the winter time? Or is it going to be being able to tolerate those periods of heat in the summer? But those two characteristics might give some insights and see if there's some overlap on those.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we've exhausted our questions and we've taken up a fair amount of your time. And let me see. Many people writing in thanks, complimenting
Okay.
you on your presentation, etc. That I want to thank on behalf of Multnomah County Master Gardeners Association. I want to thank you for your time and presentation. I found it fascinating.
Thank
And
you.
everybody who participated and listened, I hope you got something out of it. And we'll call this the end of tonight's presentation, and tune in again next month when I've forgotten what our presentation will be. But we'll be back.